That Christmas Eve, the bitter cold of Michigan seeped through my worn coat as I stood before the polished mahogany door. The phone in my pocket was still warm from my grandfather's unexpected call. "Nathan, come over right now. I'm at your parents' new house," he had said, his voice brimming with excitement as if he were about to share wonderful news. Grandpa Robert, a successful real estate developer always busy with his properties in New York, rarely had time to visit. Just the thought of seeing him made me smile despite the bone-chilling cold of the winter night. I pushed the door open and immediately the warmth from the fireplace and the savory aroma of roasted turkey enveloped me. Grandpa sat at the head of the dining table, his eyes sparkling like stars when he saw me. He stood up and hugged me tightly, his familiar cologne of cedar and mint making me forget all my exhaustion in an instant. "Nathan, do you like this house?" he asked, his voice full of pride as if he had just handed me a priceless gift. "Yes, it's a beautiful house, Grandpa," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, "but it's my parents' house." A moment of deafening silence followed. Grandpa's face stiffened, his eyes widening as they darted from me to my father, Michael, then to my stepmother, Karen, sitting across the table. My father, who always maintained a composed demeanor, suddenly turned pale, his hand trembling as he held his wine glass. Karen coughed, forcing a strange smile, but her eyes glinted with panic. "Your parents' house," Grandpa repeated, his voice dropping as cold and sharp as the night wind outside. "Nathan, explain yourself." I didn't understand what was happening, but a sense of unease surged within me. I glanced at my father, waiting for an explanation, but he only lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. Karen quickly interjected, her voice trembling. "Robert, there must be a misunderstanding. This is the family's house." But Grandpa didn't look at her. He looked at me, and in that moment I knew a terrible secret was about to be revealed. "Hello, my name is Nathan Winters. The story I'm about to tell is about the years I lived in the shadow of injustice, sidelined by my own family. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong anywhere, like you were treated as an outsider, then perhaps you'll understand me. But even if you haven't, I still want you to hear this story. A story about a boy who grew up with a heart full of scars and how he found light amidst the darkness. I was born in a small suburban town in Michigan where the streets were lined with maple trees that turned golden in the fall, and everyone knew each other like family. But my family was different from the others. My mother, Sarah, passed away shortly after giving birth to me due to complications during delivery that I still don't fully understand. All I know is that she was the only light I never got to meet. My father, Michael Winters, was a distant man who always kept me at arm's length, as if my existence was a reminder of the pain he wanted to forget. When I was 3, my father remarried. Karen, a woman with a calculating smile and sharp eyes. They had a son together, Tyler, or Ty, as everyone called him. Tyler was the center of their world. To my father, Tyler was the pride and the future of the Winters family. To Karen, Tyler was everything she lived to protect and spoil. And me, I was the stepchild, the unwanted kid, the faint shadow in the house I called home. From a young age, I felt the difference. When I was 5, I remember sitting in the corner of the living room watching Tyler receive a brand new bicycle, the kind every kid dreamed of, bright red, with training wheels and a horn. I got a used scooter with rust on the handlebars, which my father said was good enough for me. "Tyler needs new things to develop properly," Karen said, as if I wasn't worthy of anything better. When I got straight A's at school, my father would just nod and say, "Don't get complacent." Meanwhile, if Tyler got a B, the whole house would celebrate as if he'd won the state spelling bee. I wasn't a jealous kid. Honestly, I just wanted to be loved, to be acknowledged even just once. But as the days passed, I realized that in my father's and Karen's eyes, I was never good enough. Karen would say things like, "Nathan, why don't you try to be more like Tyler, or you should be grateful to live in this house." Those words, no matter how softly spoken, cut into me like knives. I started to wonder, was I really a burden? Was I truly unworthy of love? Our family wasn't poor, but we weren't wealthy either. My father worked as a branch manager at a regional bank while Karen stayed home as a housewife, doting on Tyler like he was royalty. I wasn't allowed to complain because my father always reminded me I was lucky to have a roof over my head. But that roof never truly felt like mine. My room was a converted attic space with a drafty window and a creaky twin bed. Meanwhile, Tyler had a spacious room downstairs filled with sports memorabilia and the latest gaming console. Once I asked my father why I couldn't have a room downstairs like Tyler, and he snapped, "Don't ask for too much, Nathan. Know your place." I grew up with words like those reminders that I wasn't important in this family. But I didn't let myself drown in sorrow. I learned to smile, to pretend everything was fine. Even though a storm raged inside me, I told myself that one day I would escape the shadow of this family and prove I wasn't the useless person they thought I was. When I was 18, I graduated high school with honors, though no one at home noticed. I dreamed of going to college, becoming an architect, or doing something to make Grandpa Robert, the only person who truly cared about me, proud. But that dream was quickly crushed. One evening, when I asked my father about applying for scholarships or student loans for college, he looked at me with cold eyes. "Nathan, we don't have enough money," he said. "Tyler needs to be prioritized. He has great potential, and we have to invest in him." I stood there stunned, feeling like the world was collapsing beneath me. Tyler, the kid who spent most of his time playing video games and hanging out at the mall, was the one chosen to fulfill his potential. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded and left the room. That night, I lay on my creaky bed staring at the water stains on the ceiling and promised myself I would rise on my own. If my parents didn't believe in me, I would believe in myself. I started working at a Target in town, first as a cashier, then in the stockroom. The job wasn't easy. Long night shifts, working through holidays, and dealing with difficult customers left me exhausted. But I didn't complain. Every dollar I earned was a small step toward escaping my family. I rented a small studio apartment above a deli. The walls were thin and the radiator barely worked, but at least it was mine. I no longer had to hear Karen's snide remarks or see my father's disappointed looks. Meanwhile, Tyler was fully supported by our parents. He attended an expensive private college, drove a brand new Mustang our father bought him, and never had to work a day in his life. Once Karen came to the store where I worked, saw me restocking shelves, and smirked. "Nathan, this is what you're doing. Such a shame. Tyler will never have to do menial work like this." I gritted my teeth, forcing a smile, but inside I wanted to scream, why? Why wasn't I worthy of the same opportunities as Tyler? Those years I lived in loneliness. I didn't have many friends because I spent most of my time working and saving money. But I wasn't entirely alone. Grandpa Robert was the one bright spot in my life. He lived in New York, running his real estate empire. He was a man of business, but occasionally, when he had time, he would call me. Those calls were my lifeline. He talked about his projects, asked about my life, and always said, "Nathan, you're a strong young man. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." I never told him how my father and Karen treated me. I didn't want him to worry. And part of me feared that if I spoke up, he'd think I was weak. Grandpa was the only one who told me about my mother. He said Sarah was a kind woman who loved poetry and dreamed of opening a bookstore. He blamed himself for not being there when she gave birth to me, as business had kept him away. If I had been there, things might have been different, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't blame him. I only wished I could have met her even just once, to know I had been loved. As the years passed, I grew accustomed to my independent life. I learned to fix things in my apartment, cook simple meals, and keep my heart from breaking further. But deep inside, there was always an emptiness, the void of a family I never truly had. I didn't know that while I was trying to build my own life, a great secret was being hidden by my father and Karen, a secret that would change everything. When I was 21, I was still living in my tiny studio apartment on the east side of town, working night shifts at Target. Empty mornings, microwave dinners, and interrupted sleep had become so routine that they no longer felt unusual. I didn't have much, but I had my freedom, my own space, and a shred of self-respect that I had paid for with years of silent endurance. One early summer afternoon, while I was clocking out after my shift, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Karen. "Come to the new house tonight. Address is 4827 Oak Ridge Drive. Small gathering." I read the message 3 times, staring at the screen as if it would explain itself. I had never heard them mention anything about moving. There had been no hint that they were looking for a new house, and certainly no one had asked if I wanted to visit. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to act as if nothing had happened. But then I thought maybe this was a chance to reconnect even just a little, even if it was just a polite gathering. I wanted to go, maybe to congratulate them, maybe to prove that I was no longer the quiet, withdrawn kid I used to be. I had changed, and I thought maybe they had too. I stopped by a wine shop near the store and picked out a moderately priced bottle of Cabernet, then swung by a gift shop to buy a small housewarming present, a crystal picture frame. I didn't have much money, but I wanted the gift I brought to be thoughtful. The new house was in a newly developed neighborhood on the west side of town, a place I had never been to. As my beat-up Honda turned onto a street lined with young oak trees and pristine lawns, it felt like I was entering another world. 2-story colonial houses with white siding, black shutters, and brick walkways. Everything exuded a sense of prosperity and order that I had never felt in our old house. I parked in front of the house with the address Karen had sent. It was a beautiful cream-colored home with a circular driveway, a covered porch with white columns and bay windows overlooking a manicured garden. I got out of the car holding the wine bottle and gift and stood still for a few seconds in front of the door. For some reason my heart was pounding, not out of excitement but because an indescribable feeling stirred within me, as if I was about to step into something that didn't belong to me. Karen opened the door. She was wearing a designer dress, her makeup flawless. "Oh, Nathan, come in," she said, her smile as thin as tissue paper. I stepped inside and looked around, a spacious living room with hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, leather furniture, and a crystal chandelier. Family photos already decorated the walls, my father and Karen's wedding picture, Tyler holding a lacrosse trophy. No photos of me. I wasn't surprised. My father was in the kitchen uncorking wine, dressed in a polo shirt and khakis, looking more relaxed than usual. When he saw me, he gave a single nod. "Oh, you're here. Nothing more." I handed over the wine and the gift, saying congratulations on the new house. He took them, set them on the counter without opening them, and turned away. The gathering consisted of just a few people, new neighbors, a couple from my father's work, and one of Karen's book club friends. They chatted animatedly about property values, the neighborhood's excellent schools, interior decorating, and the swimming pool they planned to install in the backyard. I sat in a corner, silent, listening. No one asked about my life. No one noticed that I nursed the same glass of water all evening. "We searched for months to find this house," Karen said, to the woman next to her, her voice brimming with pride. "Luckily, we closed the deal just before the market went crazy. Michael has such a good eye for real estate." My father nodded, smiling, not denying it. I sat there, trying to smile along. I genuinely wanted to congratulate them, not for the house, but because I believed they had finally found something that made them happy. I didn't know that in that moment I was congratulating them for taking a gift that rightfully belonged to me. That night, when I returned to my studio apartment, I opened my phone, intending to send Grandpa a quick message to check in. But I hesitated. He was getting older and busy. I didn't want to bother him. I set the phone down, lay on my Murphy bed, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Then I drifted off to sleep, completely unaware of the truth lying silently beneath my feet like a ticking time bomb. After the day I attended the housewarming party, everything seemed to return to its old rhythm, or at least the half-hearted routine I had long grown accustomed to. No one mentioned that day again. No one asked what I thought of the new house, and of course no one brought up the possibility of me visiting regularly. But something strange started happening. From that point on, for every major holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Tyler's birthday, even my father and Karen's wedding anniversary, I received an invitation to their house. They weren't warm, heartfelt invitations, but terse text messages. Dinner at 6 p.m. Don't be late. Tyler's birthday party, casual dress. Thanksgiving at 4. Bring a side dish. I went not because I believed they had changed, but because I still felt the duty of a son. Each time I brought a small gift carefully chosen with my limited budget, but my gifts were usually set aside unopened in my presence, and no one offered a genuine word of thanks. And the strangest thing was, they started pulling me into family photos. The first time was that Christmas. Karen called me over saying, "Nathan, stand next to Tyler. We're taking a family picture." I was surprised, but stepped forward. My father stood in the middle, his arm around Tyler's shoulders. I stood at the edge of the frame, forcing an awkward smile. As the camera clicked, I felt like I had just stepped into a stage play, and I was the extra thrown in to complete the scene. In the times that followed, they kept pulling me into photos. At first, it was with the whole family. Later, sometimes just with my father. Once Karen even placed her hand on my shoulder, smiling brightly. I didn't understand what was happening. Before, I had always been excluded from moments like these. The photos displayed in the old house never featured me. So why were they doing this now? I asked once casually after Tyler's birthday dinner. Why have we been taking so many family photos lately? Karen laughed and said, "Oh, we just want to capture memories. You're part of the family too, aren't you?" I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. I wasn't naive. I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I only felt like I was being used, forced, into a fabricated image I had never belonged to, as if I were playing the role of the dutiful eldest son in photos meant for display, not as myself. And then on Christmas, when I was 23, the truth finally came to light. It was bitterly cold that day. I had just finished my shift at 4:30 in the afternoon, sitting in my apartment, drinking instant coffee, planning to show up a little late as usual. Just enough to make an appearance, eat a few bites, take a few photos, and leave early. My phone rang. It was Grandpa. "Nathan, come over right now. I'm at your new house, 40827 Oak Ridge Drive. I wanted to surprise you." I froze. Grandpa was here in Michigan. He rarely left New York. His real estate business always kept him tied up. I quickly threw on my coat and rushed out the door. My mind swirled with questions. Why didn't he tell me he was coming? And why was he at my father's house? When I arrived, the house was glowing with Christmas lights. Wreaths hung on the door, and the twinkling lights of a Christmas tree shimmered through the bay windows. I knocked, my heart pounding. Karen opened the door, her smile stiffening when she saw me. "Nathan, why are you—" She stopped, her eyes darting over my shoulder, and I heard Grandpa's voice from inside. "Nathan, come in, my boy." Grandpa stood in the living room, tall and distinguished, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. He hugged me, a tight embrace that carried both excitement and an underlying tension. "I wanted to surprise the whole family," he said, looking around. "This house, it's wonderful, isn't it? Are you happy living here?" I hesitated, a wave of unease rising within me. I don't live here, Grandpa. I just visit." Grandpa's face changed. His smile vanished, and his eyes narrowed, shifting from me to my father, Michael, who stood near the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand. Karen quickly jumped in, her voice artificially sweet. "Robert, there must be a misunderstanding. Nathan likes living independently, don't you, dear?" She looked at me, her eyes practically commanding me to agree. But Grandpa didn't look at her. He fixed his gaze on me, his voice lowering. "Nathan, tell me the truth. You don't live here." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the entire room pressing down on my shoulders. "I live in a studio apartment, Grandpa, on the east side of town. I pay for it with my wages from Target." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. My father's knuckles turned white as he gripped his glass. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Michael Grandpa's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Explain yourself. 2 years ago, I sent you $450,000 to buy a house in this neighborhood, a gift for Nathan to give him a proper start in life. I made it crystal clear the house was for Nathan. So why is he living in a rundown apartment while you and your family are living in that very house? My father's face went ashen. Karen clutched her pearl necklace. I stood there stunned, feeling the ground crumble beneath me. A house for me. $450,000 a thousand. I looked at Grandpa, then at my father, searching for an explanation, a sign that this was just a misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. My father set his glass down, his voice shaky, trying to maintain composure. I thought the house would be better utilized by the whole family. Nathan's independent. He doesn't need a big house like this. Tyler's young. He needs a good environment to grow to study. Doesn't need. Grandpa roared, stepping toward my father. You're saying he doesn't need it? Nathan, the grandson I entrusted to your care, is living in poverty, working night shifts to survive, while you and your wife live in the house that was meant for him. What did you do with the money I sent? You put the house in your name, didn't you? My father didn't answer. He lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. Karen, regaining her voice, interjected. Robert, you don't understand. Nathan isn't my biological son. Tyler is the future of this family. Nathan, he doesn't deserve a house like this. He's just... Shut up! Grandpa shouted, his voice echoing so powerfully it seemed to shake the crystal chandelier. Doesn't deserve. Nathan is Sarah's son, my daughter's flesh and blood. He's my grandson, and I trusted you, Michael, to take care of him. But what have you done? You stole the gift I meant for him, deceived me with these fake family photos. He pointed at the picture on the wall, the one of the whole family in the living room, with me awkwardly standing at the edge. I thought Nathan was living happily here. I believed the photos you sent, but it turns out it was all a charade to hide your greed. My throat tightened. The photos, the times I was called over to pose for pictures, the staged moments I couldn't make sense of. It was all to deceive Grandpa, to make him think I was part of this happy family. I looked at my father, waiting for an explanation, an apology, anything, but he remained silent, his eyes avoiding mine. Nathan, Grandpa, turned to me, his voice softening but still resolute. Get your things. You're coming to New York with me. This house, I'll make sure it's transferred to you as I originally intended. And you, Michael, I'll be speaking with my lawyers. You'll answer for what you've done. Karen burst into tears, but I felt no sympathy for her. My father finally spoke, his voice breaking. Nathan, I just wanted what was best for the family. Best for the family, I repeated, my voice calm but cold. You never considered me part of this family. I've spent my whole life trying to make you proud, but all you ever saw was Tyler. You took away my future, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. I turned away, unable to look at him any longer. Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes filled with pain but also unwavering determination. Let's go, Nathan. You don't belong here anymore. The chill of Christmas night bit into my skin as we stepped out of the house that was supposed to be mine. The glow of decorative lights illuminated the snow-covered street, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Grandpa led me to a sleek black Mercedes parked in the circular driveway. His driver, a professional-looking man in his 40s, opened the door for us. To the Ritz-Carlton first, Grandpa said, his voice low but firm. I slid into the leather seat beside him, feeling like I was stepping into a different universe, a world I never thought I belonged to. Are you okay, Nathan? Grandpa asked, his sharp eyes gentle but searching, as if trying to read every thought in my mind. I don't know, Grandpa, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Everything's happening so fast, I still can't believe it. He nodded, placing a weathered hand on my knee. I know. But from now on, things will be different. You'll come to New York with me. We'll start over, just the two of us. I looked out the window, watching the Christmas lights blur past like distant stars. New York, a city I'd only seen in movies and Grandpa's stories where he built his real estate empire from nothing. I had never been there, never thought I'd have the chance, but now it was where I would begin again. A new life, a chance to escape the shadow of my past. The next morning we took an early flight to New York. I sat by the window gazing down at the endless snow-covered landscape below, feeling like I was leaving behind an old, worn-out world for something unimaginable. Grandpa sat beside me quietly reading the Wall Street Journal, but every now and then he glanced at me with an encouraging smile. When the plane landed at LaGuardia Airport, the energy of New York hit me immediately. Grandpa's driver, Thomas, was waiting with a familiar Mercedes. We drove through the bustling city streets, where skyscrapers reached toward the sky, yellow cabs weaved through traffic, and people moved with purpose. I had never seen anything like it. Michigan, with its quiet suburbs and familiar routines, seemed to belong to another lifetime. The car turned into the Upper East Side, where the streets were lined with elegant brownstones and doormen stood at attention. Thomas stopped in front of a limestone townhouse with ornate iron railings and window boxes filled with evergreens, somehow thriving despite the winter. My jaw dropped. "Is this your house?" Grandpa chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Welcome to my home, Nathan, and now it's your home too." Grandpa's townhouse wasn't just a house, it was a piece of New York history. The carved wooden door opened into a marble foyer with a sweeping staircase, crystal sconces, and original artwork lining the walls. The living room was twice the size of my entire studio apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden, Persian rugs, and furniture that belonged in a museum. I don't know what to say," I whispered, still clutching my duffel bag of belongings. "You don't need to say anything," Grandpa replied, leading me upstairs. "Your room is here." He opened the door to a spacious bedroom with a 4-poster bed, built-in bookshelves, and a window seat overlooking the tree-lined street. A new MacBook sat on the antique desk, and fresh flowers filled a crystal vase on the nightstand. "This is where you can start over. No pressure, no burdens, just a fresh beginning." I sat on the edge of the bed feeling like I was in a dream. Just yesterday I was in my cramped studio with its radiator that barely worked and neighbors who argued through the thin walls. Now I was here in a room that felt like it belonged to someone important. But alongside the overwhelming awe was a persistent ache. The house in Michigan, the house that was meant to be mine, still felt like an open wound. That evening, Grandpa took me to the Harvard Club, his private club in Midtown. We sat in a quiet corner of the dining room, surrounded by dark wood paneling and portraits of distinguished alumni. He ordered for both of us oysters, prime rib, and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than I made in a week. "Nathan," he began, his voice low and serious, "there are things we need to discuss about your father, the house, and what happened." I nodded, my heart pounding. I knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. 2 years ago, I sent Michael $450,000 to buy that house in Oak Ridge. I wanted it to be a gift for you, a foundation for your future. I was consumed with closing a major development deal and couldn't oversee the purchase myself, so I trusted Michael to handle it. I thought he would honor my wishes. He paused, his jaw tightening, but I was wrong. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my voice steady. "So Dad kept the house for himself." "That's not all," Grandpa said, his voice thick with controlled anger. "I've been sending Michael money since you were a child, not just for the house. I sent money every year to cover your education clothes, everything you needed to have the best opportunities. I thought Michael was taking care of you the way I intended. But today, when I heard you talk about living in that apartment, working night shifts at Target, I realized he kept it all for himself and his new family. It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. School tuition clothes, the opportunities I never had. All those years wearing thrift store clothes, eating ramen noodles, and working myself to exhaustion to make rent. It could have been different. My father, the man I tried so hard to please, had stolen not only the house, but also the future Grandpa meant for me. I didn't know about any of that money, I said, my voice cracking. Dad never told me. I thought he didn't have enough, so I had to manage on my own. Grandpa's fist hit the table, making the wine glasses tremble. That bastard, he growled, drawing glances from nearby tables. I trusted him with you, thinking he'd do right by Sarah's son. But he betrayed me, and he betrayed your mother's memory. Hearing my mother's name made my eyes burn. I had never met her, but through Grandpa's stories, I knew she was a gentle soul who wanted nothing but happiness for me. The thought that my father had stolen what she and Grandpa intended for me ignited a fury I couldn't contain. "What are you going to do, Grandpa?" I asked, though I could guess part of the answer. "I'm going to sue Michael," he said, his voice cold as winter steel. "I'll make sure that house is transferred to you, and I'll cut off all financial support to him. He doesn't deserve another penny." I stared at the white tablecloth in silence. Part of me wanted my father to pay, to face the consequences of his actions. But another part, the part that had grown up in neglect and learned to protect itself, just wanted to let it go. I was tired of living in resentment. "Grandpa," I said, my voice soft but firm, "don't sue him. I know you're angry, and so am I. But it's done. I don't want to spend the next few years in courtrooms and depositions. Cutting off his financial support is enough to send the message. I just want to start fresh here with you." Grandpa studied me, his eyes softening, though I could still see the storm within them. "Are you sure, Nathan? You have every right to claim what's yours." "I'm sure," I replied. "That house, it doesn't define me anymore. I want to build my future, not live trying to reclaim the past." He nodded slowly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for, Nathan. Your mother would be so proud of you." The weeks that followed in New York were a whirlwind of discovery. I moved permanently into Grandpa's townhouse, and each day felt like learning to breathe again. Grandpa didn't just give me a home, he gave me a chance to reimagine who I could be. He took me to visit his company headquarters, a gleaming tower in Midtown with panoramic views of the Hudson River. The offices buzzed with architects, engineers, and project managers working on developments across the eastern seaboard. He introduced me to everyone as Robert Sterling's grandson, and for the first time I felt seen as someone with potential. "Would you consider working here?" he asked one day as we stood in his corner office, looking out at the city skyline. "You don't have to jump into the deep end. Start with something manageable. Learn the business from the ground up." I hesitated. I had dreamed of being an architect, but I'd never imagined working in real estate development, blueprints, zoning laws, construction timelines. But the trust in Grandpa's eyes made me want to try. "I'll give it my best shot, Grandpa," I said, "but I can't promise I'll be good at it right away." He laughed, clapping me on the back. "Nobody's good from the start, Nathan, but you have intelligence and determination. That's all I need." I started working at Sterling Development initially as an assistant project coordinator, organizing permits and tracking construction schedules. The work was challenging, but with each passing day I learned to read architectural plans, understand market analysis, and even contribute ideas during development meetings. My colleagues, who at first only knew me as the boss's grandson, gradually began to respect me for my work ethic. They saw me stay late to double-check contracts, volunteer for site visits in freezing weather, and never once use my connection to Grandpa for special treatment. Outside of work, I began to truly explore New York. I walked through Central Park, visited the Met and MoMA, and spent Saturday afternoons in bookshops in the Village. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had permission to enjoy things, to exist without constantly proving my worth. Through Grandpa's connections, I also started taking evening classes at Columbia in real estate development and urban planning. The coursework was rigorous, but I threw myself into it with the hunger of someone who had been denied education for too long. In one of my classes, I met Emma Chen, a brilliant architecture student with an infectious laugh and a habit of sketching buildings on any available surface. She teased me about my meticulous note-taking and my Michigan accent that slipped out when I was tired, but she also pushed me to think bigger, to imagine what I could build rather than just what already existed. You know, she said one evening as we studied in the library, you have good instincts for this. Have you ever thought about getting your architecture degree? The question planted a seed that would grow in the months to come. Despite the new life blooming around me, the scars of my past didn't fade easily. Some nights I'd lie in the antique four-poster bed but dream of my old studio apartment, hearing Karen's condescending voice or seeing my father's dismissive gaze. I wondered if I truly deserved this life, or if it was all temporary, something that could be taken away. Grandpa noticed my quiet moments. One evening as we sat in his study, surrounded by leather-bound books and architectural drawings, he pulled out an old photo album. Inside were pictures of my mother, Sarah, laughing at a beach, Sarah reading in a garden, Sarah holding her college diploma. Your mother wanted to open a bookstore, he said, his voice soft with memory. She loved the idea of creating a space where people could discover new worlds. She would have loved seeing you here building your own future. I traced my finger over a photo of her, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. I wish I could have known her, I whispered. You carry her with you, he said. Her kindness, her strength, her refusal to let the world make her bitter. I see her in you every day. Those words began to heal something deep inside me. I started keeping a journal, writing down memories, dreams, and plans for the future. I no longer wanted to run from my past. I wanted to understand it, to let it inform, but not define who I was becoming. One morning, about 3 months after moving to New York, I received a letter forwarded from my old address in Michigan. The envelope bore my father's handwriting, and my hands trembled as I opened it. Nathan, I know I have no right to write to you. What I've done is unforgivable. I kept the house, kept the money your grandfather sent for you. I let my grief over losing your mother turn me into someone I don't recognize. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Karen and Tyler have moved out. I'm in the process of transferring the house deed to your name as your grandfather intended. I've lost my position at the bank, my own failures catching up with me. I'm working at a hardware store now, trying to make things right, though I know I can't undo the past. I hope one day you can look at me without hatred. Michael. I read the letter 3 times, each word stirring a different emotion: anger at what had been stolen, sadness for the father I never really had, and something unexpected, a faint sense of release. I didn't know if I could forgive him. The years of neglect, of being told I wasn't enough, couldn't be erased by one letter, but I knew I didn't want to carry hatred forever. I showed the letter to Grandpa. He read it in silence, his expression unreadable. It's your decision, Nathan, he finally said. If you want the house, we can arrange the transfer. If not, I'll support whatever you choose. I thought about the house on Oak Ridge Drive with its perfect lawn and bay windows. It had once represented everything I thought I wanted. But now, with my new life taking shape in New York, it felt like a relic from another person's dreams. I want to sell it, I said. Use the money to pay for my education. I want to get my degree in architecture like I always dreamed. Grandpa smiled, pride shining in his eyes. That's my grandson. Over the next year, I enrolled in Columbia's architecture program while continuing to work part-time at Sterling Development. The house in Michigan sold quickly, and the proceeds covered my tuition with enough left over to start a small investment fund, my first step toward financial independence. My father didn't contact me again, and I didn't reach out. Through mutual acquaintances in Michigan, I heard that he and Karen had divorced, that Tyler had dropped out of college and was working retail, that the family, which had once looked so perfect in those staged photos, had crumbled under the weight of its own deceptions. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, only a distant sadness for what could have been if different choices had been made. In New York, my life continued to expand. I excelled in my architecture classes, my professors praising my unique perspective that came from understanding both the business and creative sides of development. Emma and I grew closer. our study sessions evolving into long walks through the city, debates about sustainable design, and eventually something deeper. Grandpa remained my anchor. We had dinner together most evenings, sharing stories about our days. He taught me about business, about integrity, about the importance of building something that lasts. Some nights we just sat in comfortable silence, two generations finding solace in each other's company. "Do you ever regret not suing him?" Grandpa asked one evening as we watched the sunset from his study. "No," I said without hesitation. "That energy is better spent building something new." He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Your mother would have said the same thing." As my second Christmas in New York approached, I realized how much had changed. I was no longer the boy standing at the edge of family photos, desperate to belong somewhere I was never truly wanted. I had found my place not just in Grandpa's home or at his company, but in my own skin. The scars remained. They probably always would, but they no longer defined me. They had become part of my foundation, reminders of where I'd been and how far I'd come. I thought about my mother, often wondering what she would think of the man I was becoming. I hoped she would be proud. I hoped she would see that despite everything, I had found my way to the light. The city sparkled with holiday decorations as I walked home from class one evening, my breath visible in the cold air. My phone buzzed, a text from Emma about meeting for coffee, another from a classmate about a study group, one from Grandpa, asking what I wanted for dinner. I smiled, tucking the phone back in my pocket. For the first time in my life, I had people who chose to include me, not out of obligation or deception, but because they wanted me there. As I climbed the steps to the townhouse, I saw Grandpa through the window, reading in his favorite chair by the fireplace. He looked up as I entered, his face breaking into a warm smile. "How was class?" he asked. "Good," I said, hanging up my coat. "Really good." And I meant it, not just about class, but about everything, about the life I was building brick by brick on a foundation of my own making. The boy who had once lived in shadows had finally found his place in the sun. Thank you for reading my story. Sometimes the family we're born into isn't the one that shapes us. It's the people who see our worth when we can't see it ourselves. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong, like you were living in someone else's shadow, I hope my journey gives you hope. The path to finding yourself isn't always straight, but every step forward matters. What would you have done if you discovered your family had hidden such a life-changing gift from you? Would you have fought for what was yours or chosen to build something new?